everybody. Welcome to Meddkit's Provider Spotlight, where every week we are interviewing the most amazing private practices from all over the United States. Every week we come here, we have someone new, we have someone in a new specialty, but most importantly, it's really great to get new perspectives. And that's why we're here. We're here to learn, we're here to know something that maybe we didn't know before. And today, we have a really awesome special guest for you. I am very excited to introduce you to Dr. Jason Jones. He's the owner of Jones Family Chiropractic in North Carolina. Welcome, Dr. Jones.
Hey, good to be here. Excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited to dive in. I know we have a lot to get to, so let's roll in. I would love to start out and maybe having you tell us a little bit about your story. What is your why and maybe your journey to opening up, your own practice.
Sure. Yeah. When I was a kid, my parents owned and operated a restaurant, and they busted their butts in that restaurant. And it really did a number on my mom. I mean, it really just tore her to pieces physically. And she tried everything medically to get better. I mean, she was just a person who lived on, goody powders and over the counter medications and things like that. And she never really got any relief at all until she saw a chiropractor. And we didn't have a chiropractor in our town. She had to drive a half an hour to go and see one. We lived in a very rural area of Alabama. And it was one of those things where we were so happy as a family that she got the relief that she got. But really, what happened was she got her life back. And for us little kids, we got our mom back. And I made a pivot somewhere in my life that said, I want to do that for other people. I'm not sure what that's going to look like. I don't know if I'm going to be a chiropractor or not, but I want to help other people not only feel their absolute best, but I want them to function well and live life the way that they want to be able to do it.
Yeah, isn't it such a crazy difference as, a small thing in your life that can be a literal, thorn in your side and, to getting that resolved and how much you gain because of that and how much that affects yourself, but everyone around you, you know?
Yeah, oftentimes your biggest problems are your biggest opportunities.
I like
So it's like you just have to take them as that.
I absolutely love that. It's a really good perspective. That's a great way to put it. If you could maybe tell us a little bit about, the common areas that, you find people in today's age are really struggling with, but maybe, there's a lot of common things, but I think there's also some trickier cases or uncommon things that I think, you might see or other chiropractors do that people may not realize, which is in totally within your scope. And they can come see you for this. So what would maybe some of those things be for you guys?
Yeah, as a chiropractor, we actually have a tremendous amount of things that are within our scope of practice, and things have definitely evolved over the years. I mean, most people know that we help people with, neck pain and back pain, but a lot of times they think maybe that's all we do.
Right.
But we help a tremendous amount of people with, everything from, well, let me put it this way. Um, Really stress related illness. That's really the big thing that chiropractors do for people, because if you look at like the Cleveland Clinic, they say that 80% of people go see their medical doctor for stress related illnesses. And when I think about stress related illnesses, those are things like headaches, migraines, TMJ, tension or pain in the neck, shoulders, mid back, low back, sciatica, hips, knees, shoulders, elbows, even digestive problems, trouble sleeping, fatigue, all of those kinds of things. Now, they may not be the primary, some of those things may not be the primary reason a person seeks out a chiropractor initially, but for us, we see a tremendous amount of those things that you wouldn't think we could help people with, like digestive problems and sleep and energy. They just come about and they come around as we work on the person and heal up all those other things that they have. All those things tend to come back for them.
It seems like a really holistic way to, solve a lot of the issues that you have going on. You may not be realizing the lack of sleep that you're getting until you're like, yeah, now that I have more energy to do this, I've been realizing I'm not getting, whatever it is, the 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep that is required of me every day, to function properly. Or, yeah, I am getting up, multiple times throughout the night. So I think those little daily life things are so overlooked. But it's so great that you guys can help with all of that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's really a matter of not that the person doesn't want to do it or they don't want to be able to have a good night's sleep. It could be that their system is just so stressed out and so redlined, and they're so in fight or flight, and their nervous system is just so overcharged that you're just incapable in the moment, to be able to do that. And they really have to have their system reset so that they actually can fall asleep. They can stay asleep. And then when they do that long enough, their energy comes back, and then not being redlined on the stress scale, their digestion starts to come back online
Mm.
and everything starts to function the way that it was really designed to do.
That's a really good way of putting it, because I'm also one of those people that, like, I will will myself to do it. Like I can do it, da, 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 da. But if I could be one of those people that this isn't happening for me, even if I'm willing myself to do it, I'm ready, I want to take on the challenge. But if things are not in place properly, it just, no matter how much you try, it's not going to happen for you, right?
That is correct. And willing your way through it is a great short-term strategy. It really is. And that sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. You're a busy mom, or
Yeah.
you're a busy entrepreneur, you're a CEO, you're a high-level executive, or, I don't know, you do whatever it is that you do. But as a long-term strategy, there is a cost to that. And eventually it will catch up with you. And depending on, your level of pain tolerance, your level of resilience, by the time you become aware that the problem is there,
Mhm.
you could be pretty far down the road of having some serious, serious issues.
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely should not be ignored. Yeah, you can't will yourself through your way through life. So that's a really good testament to, the people that, like me, think they can do it in such fashion. But I really already like what you're saying about, your approach, and, how you guys like to treat your patients, your clients. But maybe you can dive a little bit deeper into how it's different, how your protocol is different, and maybe even some of the helpful tools that or modalities you're using in the office to aid in recovery.
Sure. Yeah. The beauty of being a chiropractor is you get to operate your practice in a lot of different ways. You could have a pediatric practice, a geriatric practice. You could have a sports practice, an injury practice. You could
Mhm.
have a practice like ours, which is a corrective care wellness practice and really a family practice, meaning we see babies all the way up until, somebody's 100 years old. So we get to see a wide variety of different types of problems and different types of people and body types and all of these kinds of things. But when you take a corrective approach, really what that entails is making sure that you're taking a deep dive into the person's history initially so that you can fully understand everything they've been through, what may have led up to this point, what they're experiencing right now, and then doing a very detailed examination of them physically so that you can get even closer to what's actually causing it. And
Mhm.
then your diagnostics, in addition to that, whether that be x-ray or some sort of scan or something that you do. For us, it's x-ray, and doing a very detailed x-ray analysis and then correlating all the findings together and really taking the time to do that. So you can give a person a thoughtful, very accurate
Sure.
recommendation as to what is it going to take to get them where they want to go.
Mhm.
And the thing I think that's missed a lot of times is, like, what are the patient's goals? Because if a patient has the goal to just feel better, that's different than the person who, is a weekend warrior and they like working out in the yard, playing golf and water skiing when they're 75 years old. That's a totally different thing, and that person's going to get a totally different recommendation. And really just curtailing the recommendation to the patient's wants, needs, and desires and goals, and then just working together to execute that plan over time, understanding that all healing is going to take time, all
Mhm.
healing is going to take repetition. And then when it comes down to modalities, the number one thing and the thing that'll make the biggest difference for any person that's going to walk into our office is always going to be a very specific, very scientific chiropractic adjustment. That one thing solves more problems than anything. Now, the additional modalities are also very helpful. We've been using low level laser therapy in our practice for 20 years. That's phenomenal. There's some soft tissue work that we do that is also very helpful, but also not really needed most of the time, honestly. But when we do need it, we have it available.
Mm,
Spinal decompression is a very powerful
sure.
technique because when people have disc bulges, disc herniations, um, severe degenerative disc disease, and problems that just won't be resolved without adding that in there, you can really start to make changes for people where other practitioners or other practices may have not been able to make it happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think having a wide array of options for the patient, I think, is really important. But at the same time, I mean, you have to be really, really good at what it is that you're doing, and
Yeah.
that actually saves a tremendous amount of time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love even just really truly listening to the patient, like how you said that goals of the patient are most often missed. And those
Yeah,
goals can vary to, improving everyday life, or yeah, they're more athletic, or they want to, do all these activities over the weekend and be able to enjoy them, moderately pain free. Um, they're very different, set of goals, I'd say.
absolutely.
Yeah, some of what you said really resonated with me, specifically in that. But do you think there is a certain cause to a lot of, aside from like obvious, injuries, for the things that you see and how detailed you're going into the history of, a patient's, life and, how their activities have played out over time. Do you think there's maybe one or a couple things that are attributing to some of these, major injuries later on, or, you know, failings of the human body?
Yeah, I think that structure equals function.
Okay,
It's one of those things where a good example would be you may have the hip strength and quad strength and low back strength to be able to deadlift 500 pounds.
sure.
But if you have a 200-pound grip, you're never going to get that weight off the ground.
Yeah.
So a person's structure is so important. And that's where I think chiropractors are ideally suited because everything starts at the core, and really what I mean by that is it's not like core, like fitness type core, but really like the spine because your brain and your nervous system run every single organ, every single tissue, every single cell of your body. And if there is any disruption or obstruction or interference to the nerve signal from the brain out to the tissue and then back to the brain, then you are going to be operating less optimally than you could. The problem is that symptoms tend to not come until we're really in trouble.
Yeah.
Meaning that most of the time, if you're at your absolute best, you have to fall at least half the way down in terms of function before you start ever even having symptoms. Symptoms do not start immediately. They usually come last, even though they're the first thing to go when you start working on somebody.
Yeah, that is definitely very interesting. Something into the effect of all of this, something that I always typically like to ask and get from you guys is, I think every specialty is maybe prone to its own misconceptions and things that see online, we're reading. It's great that people invested in their own health. Good for you. I'm glad you're looking things up, but in this day and age, we have ChatGPT, Gemini, all these things that are telling us, YouTube, sensationalized videos on what this said service is. And I'd love to know from you, what are maybe some of the common things that you get, or the maybe the common fears, or maybe theories that are out there about chiropractic care that you would just love to debunk once and for all. The old wives' tales got to go.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, most of them, that's for sure. Now, one thing I would say, just for like full transparency, and I think this will just make sense to most people, as anytime there is a negative or whatever it is that you want to say, the chances are there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Yes, it could be that somebody made it up, but yeah, but there are good and bads in anything. There are good and bad
Yeah.
restaurants, good and bad doctors, good and bad physical therapists, good and bad realtors. I mean, there's good and bad in
Yep.
anything. And people do make mistakes, and problems do come up, but that doesn't mean that every single practitioner is going to be like that.
Yeah.
Chiropractors are like fingerprints. Every one of them's different. The way the style in which they're going to deliver their care is probably going to be a little bit different. They're going to have a different kind of personality. They're going to resonate with some people they're not. But I would say some of the common ones are, people probably a little bit anxious or afraid of the care. They just don't know what's going to happen. They probably watch these sensationalized videos where they add sound effects on TikTok and YouTube and all these kinds of things, all of which are completely sensationalized and are not a reality when it comes to really taking care of people. You
Mhm.
know, I watch some of those, quite frankly, and I'm like, wow, I would not receive that at all. I wouldn't let that person work on me, just because I know the difference between great quality care and quick care that maybe isn't, from there. So I think that's one, and so it's really just more of like fear of the unknown, and
Yeah.
maybe. Well, here's what I would say. Most of the negatives that I hear, which I don't really hear a whole heck of a lot anymore,
That's good.
is usually third party. It's like they didn't hear it from directly from someone. It just kind of came down the line. But I think something that isn't really talked about all that often, and it is very easy for it to get missed, is if you go way back into the 1960s and the 1970s and you look at the Supreme Court case Wilk versus the AMA, where the American Medical Association did an above ground and then an underground campaign to try to annihilate the chiropractic profession. A lot of the negatives come from that. And all of that was unfounded. We whipped them terribly in the Supreme Court. And basically, their whole premise was to get rid of us because so they could have the market share and financial gain, and we were kind of coming in on their territory and helping people and all these kinds of things, but we didn't have pharmaceuticals and all of that, type thing. But the problem with the whole thing is that yes, we won in the Supreme Court, and all of those
Yeah.
records are available online. You can read all of those. The unfortunate thing is the damage was
Damage is
already done.
done.
And we've been dealing with that for the last 30, 40 years. And that is really where the vast majority of most of those things come from. And that's a really sad story. And I think most people just don't know that.
No, not at all. I feel like it needs to be a Netflix special, honestly. I mean, like
It
that.
100% should be a Netflix special. And I'm telling you what, when you read some of those transcripts, you are going to be like, oh my gosh. I mean, just the languaging that was used, by some of their expert witnesses. I mean, it's awful. So bad.
That's so crazy to, you hear about all these stories. I'm a huge documentary person. And so I think all the chiropractors need to come together on this one
Yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah.
and,
I
and
think I
get
think
some
there
of
are
the
some.
people.
They
Yeah.
just need to be put on. They've been done. They just need to be put on Netflix, I think.
All right, Netflix, if you're listening, this is a
Let's
good
go,
one.
Netflix.
Scoop it up, green light this already.
Yeah.
No, that's very interesting. I had no idea about this. This is exactly why we do what we do, to hear these stories, to hear, what's been told. And I love the analogy that you gave, that every practitioner is different like a fingerprint. And it's so true. Everyone has a different specialty, a different approach, different protocols, different modalities that are in the office that aid in success and recovery. And you just have to find the match for you. It's the person that you're seeing may not be it, but don't, give up the fight for the sake of one person that just wasn't a fit for you. So I think that's a really good pro tip, and you kind of like beat me to it a little bit, Dr. Jones here. But I'd love to ask you because you've been peeling off, pro tips this entire time. What are things that we can maybe do today that maybe can move a client or patient's health forward, whether it's something that we can do every day really simply. But, wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that keeping it very simple is so important. When I wrote my best-selling book, Living Smarter, last year, that really was what that whole book was about. It was about simplifying things. Literally at the end of every chapter, there is like, three questions to ask yourself so that you can start to make a transition and make a move. But doing things that are simple and reproducible and things that you can be consistent at are critical. I will say there's a couple of things. One is hydrate every single day, making sure you're drinking plenty of water. And if you're the kind of person where you go, I already drink a lot of water, but it just feels like it runs right through me, chances are you're mineral deficient. You should probably either add some salt to your water or maybe you need some magnesium or something, but you just don't have enough minerals to retain your water because water follows sodium in the body. That's just basic physiology. So making sure you're plenty hydrated. Having some sort of movement practice. I don't care if it's dancing, I don't care if it's riding a bike or lifting weights 3 times a week or just walking. And walking is magical. I used to poo-poo walking, quite frankly, because I was a big weightlifter and like
Yep.
I did a whole bunch of other things. But I'm telling you, 10,000 steps a day, if you can pull it off. And if you're only doing 2,000 now, try doing 2,500 and just try to progressively get up to that 10,000 steps a day. Those are huge. And then the other one I would say is making sure that you are just being as consistent as you can with your diet and eating more foods that have just one ingredient than having multiple ingredients in it,
Yeah.
and that just having a whole food based diet. Don't all these diet dogmas. I've done most of them. I've done carnivore, I've done keto, I've done, vegetarian, you know, tons of them, and I always come back to whole foods. Make sure you eat enough protein. Don't eat too many carbohydrates. Moderate your fats. Eat good fats. But just keep it simple. Like keep it simple. Make sure the things that you can do them consistently, because consistency is what wins in anything.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And something that perked my ears up, people talk about hydrating, but people also talk about what you had specifically mentioned was the salt factor or not having enough of those other nutrients or salt to be able to retain that and to feel hydrated, so you can, drink all this water all you want, but you have to be retaining it and to be really hydrated. So I think that's a really good point to folks that feel like how you said, water's just going right through you. I don't feel like I'm ever hydrated, even though I'm drinking a ton. That's important.
Yeah, super important. And I'll say one more thing about that. I just had a life insurance exam done, and they how much life insurance they give you is based on your health rating that
Yeah.
you have. And I use a tremendous amount of high quality salt, like every single day. And when they did my evaluation, I'm 50, I'll soon be 51 here in a couple of weeks,
Mhm.
that I had the highest health rating possible, even though I consume a lot of salt, because salt gets poo pooed, because it's like, oh my God, it's going to give you cardiovascular disease and it's going to be this, that, and the other. And the chances, the thing is, what we do know is that the person who shouldn't have a whole ton of salt, who's already, that person has to already be in end stage kidney failure. You know
Sure.
what I mean? So most people, whatever salt you don't use, you're just going to urinate it out anyway.
Uh, Very interesting to know and very practical tip for anyone also that's going through that same process. They ask a ton of questions, especially on the medical side of things. They want to know who they're working with. So it makes a lot of sense. But in the same vein of a pro tip, for all the practitioners that are also watching, you've been in
Yeah.
practice for a long time. You've got your systems down. You know how you're seeing success and how you want to treat clients. So what is maybe a pro tip for the people out there, maybe that are just starting, or maybe that's also been in their business in their practice for a long time? What is something that you do, whether it's every day, every week, or something that you just find wildly important to your entire operation, without, of course, spilling all the real secrets? But what are some maybe some pro tips for the practitioners out there?
I would tell you that um, as you go through stages in practice, things are going to change. A practice that is at 50 visits a week is not the same practice at 150 visits a week, and it is absolutely not the same practice at 350 visits a week. So you have to change. You have to level up your leadership as you go. But if I was going to give them one thing that just does not change across the board, no matter what level of practice that you're at, is training. Be training not only yourself, but train your team members. Okay. You cannot expect people to do things the way that you want them to do them by just writing it down on a piece of paper and handing it to them and never training them, or training them once or training them for 6 weeks and then never picking it back up again. You know, you have to have standards in your business, and you have to practice, even the simple things of like how to greet a patient, how to answer the phone, how to you can't leave those things up to someone's emotions or whims, or they did it before in another office or something like that. They may not do it the way that you want it done or the way that you found to be successful. So you have to have training with your team every single week, and it has to be on the calendar, and you do not violate the training, period. That's probably one of the most important things that we can give, because you think about a pro athlete, what do? They train all week long just to play for an hour, or play for an hour and a half, or maybe 3 hours. So they train way more than they actually play games.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You train to make the time that hour or whatever you have really worth it. So that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, don't violate the calendar. Yeah, when it's on there, it's locked in. I agree with that.
And I will tell you the reason for that is because the people who are coming to see you are paying you good money. They deserve a high quality experience. You might be the best practitioner in the world, and just be, an amazing clinician and healer and all those other kinds of things. But you want them to feel good about the experience. You want them to feel cared for. You want them to feel loved. You want them to feel the compassion coming out of you. And you can only really be your authentic self if you are relaxed. And one of the best ways to be relaxed is to just know that your team has everything taken care of, and you know that all you really get to do is just focus on your patient care. But you also know exactly what they're doing when
Yeah.
you're not watching.
Absolutely. And I like the practice what you preach moment and all of that.
Yeah,
You're not too proud to pick up a couple of phones or just show someone, how this is done. It's like, someone that's starting out as, wanting to be, head chef somewhere, they're starting out the dishwasher, then they're chopping onions, then they're working on sauces, and then they might get some protein, and doing that. But it's important to show the life cycle and how much of a difference this all can make when we can work well together to changing their life. And that's ultimately what you want as a business owner. So
absolutely.
I love it. Well, Dr. Jones, you've nailed it. You've given us a lot to chew on this week, and we really appreciate your time. But before we leave off, if you could tell everyone where they can reach out to get some more information, either make an appointment, or get some resources, that would be awesome.
Sure, sure. Yeah, there's a couple places. Anywhere on social media, Dr. Jason Jones. My website is drjasonbig.com. B as in boy Jones.com. And that's all of my, all my socials are on there. The book is on there. My contact information is on there. You can reach out there, and I'm just happy to help you any way I can.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, and we hope to have you on again very soon.
I would love it. Thank you.